Hi people, I'm back with some tips for you to review for tomorrow's test. First of all, people, remember the definition of excretion. Remember that it is the removal from the body of waste products of its chemical reactions, in this case carbon dioxide, urea and uric acid, carbon dioxide coming from cell respiration and urea from the amination of proteins. Then other things will be removed, like the excess of water and salts taken in with the diet, spent hormones, drugs and foreign substances. Okay, if we talk about excretory organs, don't forget to talk about lungs. Remember that they supply the body with the oxygen the cells need for cell respiration, and they get rid of carbon dioxide, plus an incidental loss of water that comes from the separation of the carbon dioxide and the hydrogen carbonate, in which carbon dioxide was transported in the blood. You see? Then you have to remember the kidneys that are responsible for removing urea, the nitrogenous waste from the blood, excess of water, salts, hormones and drugs. Okay? We can also consider liver as an excretory organ, as it excretes bile pigments coming from bilirubin. Remember that bilirubin is the product of the breakdown of the hemoglobin, and this bilirubin will be transported to the gallbladder and then secreted into the small intestine to emulsify the fats, and it gives the color to the feces. Okay? In the case of the skin loses incidental water, though it excretes in a way salts and urea when we sweat. However, we cannot consider skin as an excretory organ because sweating is a response to a rise in temperature and not to a metabolic process of our body. The excretory system is formed by various structures. The main ones that we can see are the kidneys, fairly oval they are, brownish, and these little yellow glands on top that are called adrenal glands, that are quite important because they produce adrenaline, whose function we have discussed in class. Okay, remember the three parts inside each kidney, cortex, medulla and pelvis, and the function of the smallest functional and structural unit, that is the nephron. Then we have the ureters, that are these yellow structures that run from the kidneys to the bladder. Remember that the bladder is the organ that collects urine excreted by the kidneys before the disposal by urination. So urine enters the bladder via the ureters and leaves through the urethra. Around the urethra there is a ring of striated muscle that is called the urethral sphincter, that allows voluntary control over urination. Remember that this sphincter matures around the second year of life. That's why we humans are forced to wear diapers before that time, because we can't control urination. People, remember that a kidney consists of many tiny tubes that are called the renal tubules, held together with connective tissue. Remember that when we cut up the kidney, we could identify three very clear regions. One that was darker, that was the cortex. Another one that had kind of striations, that was the medulla. And a kind of white area that is called the pelvis, that is the area that joins the kidney to the ureter. Well, do you remember that we talked about the nephron, that is the basic structural and functional unit of the kidney? Remember that we have 4 million nephrons in a kidney to improve or to enlarge the absorption area of the kidney. Okay, remember that a nephron is formed by a glomerulus, a renal capsule or Bowman's capsule, the renal tubules, the collecting ducts, and all the blood capillaries that ensure the reabsorption of all the needed things in our blood. If you have a look, the glomerulus, the capsule, and some parts of the tubules are included in the cortex, while the loop of Henle and the collecting ducts can be placed in the medulla. The process of ultrafiltration happens in this nephron, okay? So remember that blood with a high urea concentration is delivered to the kidneys at a very high pressure, okay? It comes from an artery. Suddenly the artery becomes thinner and it coils up, forming the glomerulus. As the blood is coming with high pressure, this pressure forces plasma out of the capillaries. Remember that plasma is very similar to tissue fluid in composition. So only big size molecules will stay in the blood. This means proteins and red blood cells will stay in the blood, while water, dissolved salts, glucose, urea, uric acid will cross and they will be collected in the renal capsule. Here we are. Okay. Then all this liquid starts traveling around all this long tubule. Okay. Why? To give the kidney time to reabsorb all the things that are really necessary for our body. For example, our little friend glucose, okay? Remember that glucose will return to our capillaries through first diffusion and then active transport. The same as some salts that are also needed to ensure that there is a concentration gradient in the case of water that needs to be reabsorbed. We know that medulla is salty, okay? Along all these tubules, there is a selective reabsorption of glucose, salts, and some water, okay? The remaining liquid contains urea, that is the nitrogenous waste, plus salts, plus some water. And this will escape this nephron as urine, okay? Remember that 90% of the water is reabsorbed in the collecting duct, okay? The kidney can reabsorb water from here and return it to the blood, okay? Then we will see how this reabsorption of water is controlled by our brain. So at the end of the process, we will have urine escaping that is mainly some water plus concentrated urea plus excess salts, spent hormones, and drugs that your body does not use anymore. Well, this is my favorite picture of a nephron, yeah? As a summary, remember that blood comes through the renal artery at a very high pressure. Suddenly, it becomes thinner and coils up, forming the glomerulus. That is a kind of capillary bed, because you can see that the same blood that enters is the same blood that leaves the nephron, okay? As this blood comes at a very high pressure, plasma leaks out, okay? And only molecules of enormous size, like proteins and red blood cells, stay in the blood. Water, urea, glucose, salts, spent hormones, drugs, yes, they cross and they are collected, in the Bowman's capsule, okay? Then, remember that this process is called ultrafiltration, okay? After that, this moves through the renal tubules. These convoluted tubules, they are so long and so convoluted to give time for the kidney to do the second process, that is the reabsorption. Remember that through a difference in concentration, glucose, some salts and water must be reabsorbed, and they return to the blood that is going to leave the kidney in the renal vein, okay? Remember that this concentration gradient is achieved thanks to the saltiness of the medulla, okay? Remember that here in the collecting duct, 90% of the water is reabsorbed and returns to the blood as well. Okay, so the urine leaving the collecting ducts is formed mainly by water, concentrated urea, excess salts, spent hormones, spent drugs. These collecting duct gets together to other collecting ducts at the pelvis, and then they form the ureter. So urine goes from the kidney to the ureter, then to the bladder, then to the urethra, and then out.